Lifestyles have changed considerably because of the hi-fi revolution. In this program, Melbourne electronics expert Alex Ensel will comment on the influences these changes have had on the way we live.
But at least with your stereo, you can control exactly who you're listening to, how they sound, when they start, when they finish. And wouldn't it be nice to be able to just have Linda Ronstadt exactly how you want her, when you want her?
Oh well, I feel so good today. We just touched ground on an international runway. Jet propelled back home from overseas to the USA. New York, Los Angeles, oh how I yearn for you.
Alex, how do you think interest in hi-fi was first generated?
Well, before the Second World War, there have always been hobbyists who like to improve things and make their equipment sound better. But I think after the Second World War, there are a lot of people who'd been into electronics and learnt new things, and an atmosphere of hedonism occurred, and they just wanted to make things sound better, get new pleasures, new hobbies.
What did people expect of sound in those days? Were they discerning?
Their expectations were lower because they judged according to what they had at the time. And as the equipment improved, they became far more sensitive. At that time, I can remember when I started off selling audio equipment, I was told the public have tin ears. They can't hear anything. There were actually recording engineers who said this in very elaborate talks about how the average person, especially women, can't hear the difference. Women hate high-frequency sounds. It's bad for them. They get nervous and upset.
I do look for a really true sound, and it has to be good at low-level listening because you're not always playing your records at loud levels. And that keeps the ladies happy too, because one of the things that's not generally known is that the women don't like as loud a level as men from a physiological point of view. It actually hurts them. Their threshold of pain is lower.
How do you personally, as a male of course, judge sound?
I want something that sounds natural and easy, a sort of effortless quality, the feeling that if you turn the volume up a bit, no nasty things are going to happen. They're not going to rattle or shake.
I think good sound is a natural reproduction of the original instrument or instruments or vocalist, as the case may be. And a lot of people would term good sound to be impressive sound, and that may not necessarily be or bear any resemblance to the original sound. Very few people, for example, would go to a live concert and tell the bass guitarist that they wanted him to play with a little bit more bass, or they wanted a bit more treble from the cymbals, and yet that's the type of thing that they're looking for when they buy a hi-fi system.
People often complain about the quality of sound. What do you think is bad sound?
Well, bad sound leaves me tired after listening to it. It's a physical quality, like a badly running car. It's things seeming out of focus, that you can't quite hear things right, that it could be better if only something could be changed. It's a feeling that suddenly the equipment's going to distort. Everything's going to start sounding rough, though it sounds reasonable now. It's a feeling of uneasiness. You don't know what's going to happen next. Really good equipment sounds predictable. Bad equipment, you're never sure what's going on.
Do you think then that sound through a hi-fi system as we hear it should be a faithful reproduction of what we call live sound?
I think it should be, but it's not quite so simple, because very few people go regularly to concerts, so their standards of comparison aren't quite so clear-cut. The comparison, in what is live sound anyway? I mean, do you mean in the Melbourne Town Hall, at Festival Hall? Which type of singer is a natural singer? There is no real standard that you can apply simply, but there is some general, call it community standard, what sounds good and what's acceptable. So when you hear it, you're quite sure of what it is, even though it's so hard to pin down in a sentence.
Businessman Raymond Graham has installed a wide range of hi-fi equipment in his house in Hyatt, Melbourne. He feels FM stations should play more middle-of-the-road music.
In addition to the speakers in the house, we have several pairs of headphones, a top-class set in the family room, and an excellent pair in the den, and also my daughters each have their own headphones. The idea of this, of course, is that we can listen to our own music without disturbing other people. Probably the most used pair are set that I have in the den because I'm an early riser and spend an hour or so listening to music every morning.
What do you think about the use of headphones? Can headphones actually improve bad sound?
No, the good headphones will make bad sound bad more clearly. A good pair of headphones will sound better than a very expensive set of speakers. But then, of course, you can only listen by yourself. It's a solitary pleasure, and very few people like headphones by themselves. We tried to sell headphone systems of superlative quality, and people buy it in addition to the equipment they have, but they don't want that feeling that they're the only ones that can listen to it. Because listening to music is a group activity. People like to talk to their friends and say, "What did you think of that?" And the friend says, "Isn't that wonderful? Your system sounds so good, or your record sounds so good. Something's really great." So it's a shared pleasure, and headphones don't allow people to do that.
Headphones are probably the truest sound as yet that can be obtained, because speakers are the weak link in the chain, and headphones don't have the inherent weaknesses of speakers. But I still find that with all their good quality for home listening, I don't like them because you become aware of the fact that you're wearing something. And one of the problems, I think, with headphones is that when you turn your head, the whole environment turns with you. And that's not how it is in a real situation.
16,000 hertz, 15,000 hertz, 14,000 hertz, 13,000 hertz.
Well, can you actually hear all the signals that we've been listening to?
No, I can't. Unfortunately, the top frequencies are beyond my hearing at this stage.
And how much equipment do you actually have in your home?
I'd say approximately $3,000 worth.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money to spend on equipment. Is it worth it if you can't hear all those signals?
I think it's worth it. We get a great deal of enjoyment out of listening to all types of music throughout the house.
You get more critical if your hearing isn't as good. You need that extra dimension that good sound can give you. The difference between something being intelligible and something being incomprehensible becomes very important. So I think continuously that good sound is something that you can always appreciate. Conductors are 70 years old, and no one accuses them of not being able to hear the orchestras. And education in listening, as your hearing deteriorates, your educated powers, your ability to pick differences and nuances in music keeps on improving and increasing. And this is why the great conductors can continue for such a long time.
Well, I think just because somebody has a loss of high frequency response doesn't mean that he can't get a lot of enjoyment out of music that doesn't have content of sound in that high frequency. So that if somebody can't hear above, say, 10 or 12,000 cycles, there's still a lot of music, a lot of recordings that he can listen to and enjoy. I think the loss of hearing in one or another form shouldn't be a major consideration as to the type of equipment, or in fact the quality of equipment, or the money one spends on a hi-fi system.
Well, do you often listen to aeroplanes when you're driving?
Yes, we put it on, quite often. Comes around with the tape, and it's quite interesting to listen to, especially if you have someone in the back seat that hasn't heard it. They find it very interesting.
What sort of effect do you think a quadraphonic hi-fi system can have on a driver?
I think because of the sound is so much better, I think that it's very relaxing to listen to.
Can it actually help your driving?
It all depends, I think, what music you've got on, but I think it can help your driving. I think if you have a very relaxing type of music on, I think that it can definitely relax someone that's tense or just finished screaming at the kids or something.
Do you hear traffic sounds when you have music on in the car?
No, I don't really.
Do you think that's a potential danger?
No, I don't think so. I think you can see what's going on. That's the main thing.
Do you listen to much music in your own home?
Well, we have an intercom radio system, and it goes throughout the whole house. And no matter what route you have on, I normally have a radio station playing music. And quite often I've got it on the same station in the car, and I sort of walk out the door, get in the car, and I finish the tune off in the car.
Was it expensive to install this quadraphonic system in the car?
This comes with a Rolls, standard equipment.
Is it easy to buy cartridges for the car?
No. There's a small selection in Melbourne, but it's very bad. And on a recent trip to America, I just picked up a few of the latest ones because they seem to think that because you own a Rolls, you have to have some orchestra playing. And so I picked up Rod Stewart and the Village People.
So in fact, most of the time your system in the car wouldn't be working to full capacity?
No. Very difficult to get quadraphonic, and it's just very difficult to get the cartridges, decent cartridges at all here, even in stereo.
How important do you think it is to have good sound, whether in your home or in your car?
I think it is important to have good everything, whether it's sound or what else.
After all, look, people spend a lot of time in their cars. They enjoy their equipment at home, and then some thought, well, why can't we enjoy a comparable level of reproduction when we get in our car? And so now there are manufacturers making in America 100-watt amplifiers for car use, enough to fill the Melbourne Town Hall, but in the car it can sound really great. Now, a person might spend 2 or 3 hours in the car, and a lot of people, they're really going to be sitting in their equipment. They're going to be driving their car and their stereo at the same time and listening to what they like.
Tony Savory's work as a commercial traveller has him driving thousands of kilometres every month. As we'll see, he has installed elaborate hi-fi equipment to listen to music.
Tony, could you describe the sort of equipment you have in your car?
On the passenger side, I have the cassette deck, which is coupled to 2 speakers at the back, including their power amplifiers. In the centre, I have the 8-track cartridge deck, AM/FM radio connected to a power amplifier, and they in turn are connected to 4 speakers in this section of the cabin.
Is that equipment worth a lot of money, Tony?
Well, I suppose somewhere in the vicinity of $2,000.
Mm-hmm. And how much time would you spend driving every week?
Every week, approximately 1,000 to 1,500 kilometres at average per week.
Which is how many hours every day?
3 or 4 hours every day, taken over a day at least.
Mm-hmm. So in that many hours spent driving every day, what sort of music do you listen to?
Principally, I prefer for driving the Baroque period. Baroque composers, I think, is a beautiful music and easy to listen to and quite relaxing.
Why do you find that's the best sort of music to listen to when you're driving?
Well, you do get a certain amount of road noise, and where you get more modern composers have a wider range of sound, pianissimo to forte in their compositions. The Baroque period seemed to be more even sound, which is very good for car listening. And as I say, it's very relaxing type music.
You can draw parallels between the permissive society, the pill, and the rise of stereo. People feel now that they're entitled to do something as long as they enjoy it. And so you'll see in Playboy magazine, for example, a picture of a stereo unit, and it's got a whole list of records that should play to your girlfriend in order to seduce her. And so this type of attitude has sort of regenerated itself in, I think, the disco world. People go to discotheques and they read about the pop stars' complex love lives, and they recreate that in their home too. Because when they hear something about the pop star, they sort of feeling that they own that pop star. He's part or she's part of their world. And that also has become part of our society. And part of that is the appearance, where people are honest about the equipment looking like what it is. They know that now they can have it any way they like. They're not ashamed of having their equipment look like equipment. They want it to be hi-fi equipment. They're proud of it. You can get people who build whole rooms around their audio equipment. They just want people to see, and they want to feel themselves that that's what they have, that's what they own, and that's what they care about.
Do you think many architects take into account the need to place hi-fi equipment well?
Well, yes, they do, but depending on the client, of course. If the client requires such fine equipment and he has a good ear for music, then yes, the architect will do it. Otherwise, they'll only give you background music.
Do you think there's a trend towards the so-called media room, which incorporates hi-fi and television and radio?
Yes, I find it within the last 2 to 3 years it's more and more becoming more in demand, and I've got a few clients now who request such a room, and even one of them brought back good equipment from America, a disco with the lights flashing on and off for parties. Of course, that's more on the lighter side of the...
Do you think people generally tend to want to hide their hi-fi systems or to make a feature of them?
Well, depending again on the equipment, most of it is built in. I design units where the equipment is built in, but then there are other equipments on the market which you'd like to show and leave it on a shelf because they're of such exquisite line.
I mean, the basic requirements are to have a room that's rigid. You don't want sort of flapping walls and things that vibrate and glasses that tinkle. You want a room that, let's say, has some soft furnishings in it, maybe some carpets to give a slightly damped quality. But really, a well-made, normally proportioned room can sound good with any form of good equipment. Now, if you want to go into it more elaborately, that's possible. But the real problems of putting equipment in homes is that very few architects think of the design from the acoustic point of view.
Well, you've been the consultant in the building of this house. Have you taken into account the necessity for hi-fi placement here?
No, I don't think anybody really considers hi-fi. Maybe they should, but I think at the moment people don't take it into account when they're building. I think if people spend a lot of money on hi-fi, as they are spending, some people up to $15,000, I believe, it seems ridiculous they don't spend the extra bit to make their houses suitable, but they don't in general.
Do you find generally that it's a costly business changing a room to suit a hi-fi system?
Well, when you say you change the room, you make it suit the room. If you have that specialty room, then it's, well, naturally it's all taken care of. Otherwise, you put it in your family or lounge room. Again, what the people require. And you try to merge the speakers into the background.
Well, a rough estimate of cost of renovation?
A room, well, it can cost from about $4,000 to $10,000 to $20,000 to do such a room.
Would there be many clients of yours who would request that sort of change?
Well, I at the moment have 3, and I hope in the future that I'll get many more.
But when you come to leisure activities, hobbies are all increasing, and hi-fi is something that a whole family can share. The children like it, the parents like it, you can have a party together, so it can be a group activity. Unlike a lot of things, if you're a model train enthusiast, it's really hard to get everyone involved in it. But with hi-fi, the whole family can be part of it.
What sort of music do you like listening to?
I'm basically middle of the road, although many times I like to listen to the youngsters rock because there's some good sound comes out of it. And I like some classical music.
So normally you would listen to your own records and cassettes, or do you listen to radio as well?
Mainly I listen to my own records and cassette, but I do use the radio quite a bit.
Well, this painting is called Neptune. It's part of a series of 9 paintings based on the planets. But the music isn't Gustav Holst's planets, it's the music from Sibelius called The Swan of Tunella, and that was the original inspiration for them. And this is just one of 9.
What sort of music do you normally listen to?
All classical.
Have you been a classical music listener for a very long time?
For 9 years now. I first discovered in 1970, and that was during the Beethoven bicentenary, and I've been hooked ever since.
How many records do you have?
About 7,000.
There's an enormous number of records. How did you manage to spend that much money on records in so short a space of time?
Well, it's my main priority. The bulk of my wage would go on it, so that's where it's come from.
Could you paint without your hi-fi system?
I've tried, and I couldn't at one stage. Once my system broke down, and I was without it for about a week, and no matter how much I tried, I just couldn't. I needed the music.
I know it's a difficult question, but what sort of thing does music do for you when you're painting?
Oh, it's very hard to answer. It just gives me a very good feeling. Makes me high, if you like.
If a person said to me that he's only interested in rock, I'd think he'd want a lot of power. He'll want something that sounds crisp and have a sort of a driving type of sound, but he wouldn't necessarily be worried that much about the smoothness and sweetness of the result, because so much of that music is electronically amplified, so there are different sort of standards and attitudes to it.
What about your music system? You've got obviously a really good one. Did that set you back much?
Oh, yeah, about $5,500.
Where did you get the money for that?
Oh, an excellent bike accident. I spent it all on the stereo, the first stereo anyway, and I had that ripped off. And with the insurance money, I bought this second one. I'm very happy with it. It's really good.
How come you chose to spend your money on that and not on a new bike?
Oh, the bike's good enough when it's going. I don't think I'll change my bike, I've always wanted a really good stereo, so spend it on that.
Are you happy with the sort of sound you're getting?
Oh, for sure. Really happy.
How much do you listen to music?
Oh, quite a bit. Like every night we have it going.
What sort of music generally?
Oh, heavy rock. Heavy, what do you call it, sort of deep purpley rock.
So if a person said he's mainly interested in classical music, I'd think of having something that sounds very smooth and even, very low distortion, an amplifier that's got a sweet quality, if you can put it that way, and to get really natural type of sound.
As a professional musician, you must have very high standards in the quality of the sound that you require. What sort of equipment do you have?
I have the finest equipment that can be bought here, and it has a beautiful sound, wonderful sound.
How much would your equipment be worth?
Over $10,000.
Do you find that you can use your hi-fi equipment when you're teaching?
Oh yes, it's a great help for the students, because here in Australia, students don't get much of an opportunity to hear great pianists in the flesh. And I said to them that this is practically the same sound as the human voice or the piano they're playing on, or whatever it is.
Has your hi-fi system replaced concert going for you?
No, not at all. I go to practically everything that's going around.
So it's a supplement, is it?
Yes. Mm.
What about the problem of maintenance in your records? Do you spend a lot of time cleaning them?
Not really, but I look after them, and I have the gun, and that helps, and I have a nice little brush. But I don't play my records if there's any dust on them.
No, most people buy in a normal price range. Big equipment's interesting, like expensive cars, but most people just buy good equipment that satisfies their particular requirements. They're not into high power or fantastic results. They just want something good.
When you talk about a normal price range, what area are you speaking of?
Oh, $500, $800. It depends what equipment's going into, but that general area.
But there are enormous variables in the price that one can spend. To get a good quality of sound reproduction, I would think that you would be looking to spend somewhere in the order of $1,000 and upwards.
What would be the maximum?
That you can spend or you should spend?
That you should spend.
I would think that there's no necessity for domestic applications to spend more than about $5,000 on a complete system.
People can get satisfaction for very low price systems, and the sort of equipment we're thinking about. You can be $500-600 and get something that you'll really enjoy. But I think that satisfaction is more in the person buying. There's not some sort of price you can say, this is where good equipment starts. It depends what you're after.
What would be the value of the equipment you have here?
Oh, the value would be about $5,000.
Many hi-fi magazines seem to be disregarding the musical content of records and seem to be commenting only on the sound. What are people listening to, the sound or the music?
There are a minority of people to whom the music is irrelevant and they quest about sound as the only thing they're interested in, but they're only there because there are so few of them. They're good for jokes about people who just sit listening to the sounds of bullfrogs or just involving themselves in some little known aspect of the sound reproduction, but they are rare. Most people just like music to sound good, and I don't think you can separate the music sounding good and the music itself. They expect both. They're not satisfied with something, the good performance and a bad recording. They want the lot, and they can get it, which is a good thing about equipment today.